So welcome to everyone who is already logged on. Thanks for your patience, bearing with us as we got set up. This is the first ENS webinar, so it's the first time we've all been on the platform together. So we've had a bit of fun working all the technology out, but I think we've got there, and hopefully you can now see Valerie's screen and Valerie herself, and she's going to be the first speaker. She's the ENS Vice President, and today she will be presenting along with her colleagues. Eileen is the next speaker, and they are presenting the Nuclear for Climate campaign presentation, and Valerie will talk to you about that now. So thank you everyone for logging on today, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk to you about the Nuclear for Climate initiative. So the Nuclear for Climate initiative was funded in 2015 for the Paris Climate Conference, and ENS, European Nuclear Society, is one of the main co-founders, together with the American Nuclear Society and the French Nuclear Society. Today, the initiative gathers around 150 nuclear associations around the world. So what I will do is that I will remind to all of us why we have funded this initiative and what the problems we're trying to tackle and what are our goals, and also present to you a few studies about how nuclear is a solution right now, is part of a solution to fight climate change. And then I will hand over to Eileen, who will talk on behalf of the European Young Generation about what our activities have been around the initiative and what we're planning to do as part of a preparation for the next climate conference, which will take place in December in Poland. And I think Eileen will talk about how you can also get engaged into the campaign and what we can do, every one of us can do. So let me start. So let me get my PC running. Yes. So this is the actually only poll, opinion poll that we have. It's from 2015, but things haven't changed much since that, about how people perceive different technologies. And this is a worldwide survey. It's been done in 24 countries across 5 continents. And what you can see is that in general, and it's probably true in your country as well, people really like renewables, right? And you see that nuclear energy, we still have 42% support, and it varies a lot from country to another. But we're kind of low on the agenda. I think coal is worse than us in terms of perception, but still, I mean, it's very clear that people really love renewables. So what's really a problem is that when you ask people who said that they don't really support nuclear, is the fact that they have a very wrong perception of the benefits provided by nuclear. And what's really a problem is that you can see on the left side is that most of them do believe that nuclear causes climate change. So I would say this is the number one issue that we need to tackle today, is that, as you will see, as every big study and all the experts recognize nuclear as a low carbon source and a solution to fight climate change, the public perception today is very much the opposite. It's very much that actually people believe that nuclear actually is part of the causes of climate change. Second issue we're trying to tackle is that when we ask people, do you believe that we can solve all the worst problems within 20 years with just renewables? Actually, you see that many people actually believe this is possible. And part of the reason is that they really don't know, the possibilities of different technologies and their limits. So they actually believe it is possible to actually solve the worst problem with only renewable energy. when you look at the evolution of anti-nuclear communication that we've seen at different climate events, I think now for the last 3 years we've been running the initiative, and so we've had experiences, with the anti-nuclear campaigns that we've seen. There's been different evolutions. What we can say that you see on the left side corner, the Don't Nuke, the climate campaign has been active, especially since Copenhagen in Europe. But since COP21 in Paris in 2015, we've seen a lot of communication around 100% renewable, playing on the fact that people actually don't make the difference between low carbon and renewable. In Marrakesh, there was a specific agenda because that was at the time the United States started announcing that they would get out of the Paris Agreement. But what you can see in Bonn is two things. First, a very strong communication against coal, which was the thing they did at the Niraf coal plant. But on the other side, they were giving every day a Fossil of the Day award. And actually, during COP, they did give a Fossil of the Day award to France, and it was in response to France announcing that they will give away the objective of getting down to 50% nuclear by 2025. So there was a complete confusion and communication saying that nuclear was actually a fossil energy similar to coal. So the Nuclear for Climate initiatives, as I said in the introduction, brings together many professionals and scientists of the international community. And in that regard, it's a grassroots initiative. It's not an initiative of organization, though it's coordinated through the association. It's an initiative from all the professionals and scientists that work in nuclear. And our key message is that we proudly believe that nuclear energy is part of a solution. As you can see, and I think Eileen will cover it, we're quite active on several channels right now, and we've been quite active as well publishing papers, and we've been quite active as well organizing conference and our presence during the climate conference. So we have three things we want to achieve together. We want to be able to talk to decision makers, to be part of a climate conversation. Very often, nuclear is left out of a climate conversation, and we only talk about renewables. So we want to be part of this conversation, and nuclear really being considered as part of the solution. We want to work and motivate our employees to be really proud about working for nuclear and to speak out loud about being proud of working for nuclear. And towards the general public, our objective is really the general public's awareness of nuclear as a low carbon energy. So to support our messaging and to support our activity, we have looked at the different studies with specialists of energy economics and how they portray nuclear as part of a solution. So as you know, the IPCC, the climate experts, recognize nuclear as a carbon-free electricity, and they identify three sources: renewables, nuclear, and carbon capture and storage. So you can see that we are emitting about 15 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. So we are around the same level than wind and solar. So that's why we say that the amount of CO2 that we emit is comparable to that of renewable energy. So what do the experts say? So the data on the left is actually the latest data that was published by the International Energy Agency from OECD. So the reason why we're using a lot of information from the OECD is that we know that it's peer-reviewed, and we know also that very anti-nuclear countries such as Germany are buying in this data, right? So that's why it's very reliable and very credible data. So what the OECD says in their scenarios is that to be able to reach the objectives that were agreed on in the Paris Agreement, which is about 2 degrees in 2100, and potentially a stretch goal of 1.5 degrees in 2100, we need to completely decarbonize the energy sector by 2060. So what you have here on the left is the blue line is the 2-degree scenario, 2100 with 50% probability, and the green one is 1.75 degree 2100 with 50% probability. That you see that there's a lot of actually, it's the opposite. I think you understood it. I mean, the more we want to decarbonize, of course, the quicker we need to go. So you can see that we have this objective of decarbonizing the energy sector. So if we look at the electricity sector today, and at the chart on the right, you can see that today 70% of electricity, of our world electricity, is still produced from fossil fuel. So we have really a long way to go, because we need to go from 70% to zero in just 30 years. And on top of that, during the same time, the amount of electricity consumed in the world is expected to double. So we really have a double challenge. Why is it supposed to double? For two reasons. Because the population is supposed to go at 9 billion by 2050. And also, we have still today about 1.5 billion people who don't have access to electricity, and those guys need to catch up. So considering the size of the challenge, and it's really the main message of our program and the voice we want to carry, is the fact that we will need all low-carbon energy technologies. That means we will need renewables, we will need nuclear, and we will need carbon capture and storage technology. So nuclear energy is available. It's low carbon, and it's proven as an efficient industry solution. So it's available. So we have all these nuclear reactors today in operations. And what's really important is that they're operating in the countries that are emitting the most CO2. So we're talking about the United States, we're talking about China, we're talking about India, we're talking about Europe, we're talking about Japan, we're talking about Russia. So they're kind of well located because all the big emitting countries master today nuclear technology. But it's also proven efficient. So we have this data from World Energy Outlook 2014, still the OECD, that said that since 1970, we have avoided the equivalent of 2 years of CO2 emissions. And that you can see on the graph on the right. The blue line is how much CO2 has been avoided by hydroelectricity, and we're second behind hydroelectricity. And we have, as you see, avoided the release of 2 years of CO2 emissions since then. According to the same study, we should save the equivalent of 4 years of CO2 emissions by 2040. So that means we're not solving every problem, but we are part of the solution. So still, according to the same study, that means that there will be a very big need for significant nuclear capacity by 2050. So basically, we need to double the nuclear capacity by 2050. What you can see on the right is the expected mixed in 2050, both in the 2DS, the 2-degree scenario, and the beyond 2DS, the 1.75 scenario. And you can see there will be a lot of renewables, which is the green part. But still, I mean, we'll need a lot of nuclear as well, and we will double capacity, which you can see on the graph below. So we'll have a major contribution to the reduction to go to the beyond 2DS scenario. So the IEA has listed about 38 clean technologies that are necessary to solve the climate problem. So the ones that are on track, there are only 4 of them. So you can see today, this is data which is very recent. This is May 2018. They say that only 4 clean energies are on track out of the 38. You see solar PV is on track, lighting is on track, electrical vehicles is on track according to their forecast. And you see nuclear power, what they say is more efforts needed. So let's go. Oh, before I go to the next slide, the consequence of not being on track is really the conclusion at the bottom of the slide, is that though we have all the countries have signed the Paris Agreement, the world is not on track. And actually, the first data from 2017 shows that we're still increasing carbon emissions. So we're not on the track to decarbonize. We're still increasing carbon emission. And the fact that these technologies are not on track puts a serious case so that we put these technologies on track, and especially nuclear power. So is nuclear on track? So from the same report, you see that actually last year we had a record on new capacity that we've put online in the world, but it's still not enough. We should aim as to double this capacity. And we believe when you look at the different regions that the reason why we're still too slow for two reasons. The first one is because we are currently moving from generation 2 to generation 3, so it takes time for us to move from one generation to another. And the second reason is because of the problems on electricity market, and that's specifically true in the United States and Europe. If we look at Europe, because we are the European Nuclear Societies, we can see on this map. So if you don't know this website, I really encourage you to go. There's an app, which is great because you can see live emissions and live electricity mix for all the countries in Europe. And this is the yearly average. And the learnings from that is that the countries that have completely decarbonized their electricity mix, you see Norway that has decarbonized with hydro. But the three other countries you see are Sweden, France, and Switzerland. And these three countries have completely decarbonized their electricity mix with a combination of two technology, nuclear and hydro. So thank you very much. So once I've presented that, I will hand over to Eileen. Go ahead, Eileen.
Thank you very much, Valerie. I hope you can all hear me, and I will try to share my screen now with you. Okay, so I will tell you a bit about the organizational part about the Nuclear for Climate initiative from an ENS Young Generation Network point of view. So I will briefly present to you the ENS-YGN. Some of you may know it anyhow. So it's a network that was created, the first Young Generation was created in 1994 in Sweden. And since 1995, we are part of the ENS. And today, most of the countries in Europe do have a young generation. That means this is all the young professionals from the nuclear industry gathered together in this kind of young generation. This idea is not found in any other industry. So we're the only ones, the only industry that have this network organization. So the young generation do organize a conference every 2 years, which is the ENYGF, which will be held next year in Belgium. And otherwise, we try to work on knowledge transfer. And we are present in conferences to share the voice of the young generation. And we also do have a lead role in the Nuclear for Climate campaign, especially in the communicational part. So as Valerie has told you already, there are several main organizations that are the organizational part for the Nuclear for Climate. They all gather in the so-called steering committee. So you can see ENS here and the SFEN, this French organization, the Americans, the Canadians, the Korean, Japanese organization, and also the International Youth Nuclear Congress. And as well, World Nuclear Association, they meet once or twice a year to discuss the main points of the Nuclear for Climate organization. So we do write position papers. We are part of the Conference of Parties, the COP, the Climate Change Conference. We try to organize as much side events as possible. And also we try to trigger communication campaigns. And I will show you now what position papers have been published in the role of nuclear for climate. So the first one was the position paper of all the nuclear societies worldwide. So in the first round, there were 41 nuclear societies, which represented around 50,000 scientists in 38 countries. This was done in 2015. 1 month later, the ENS-YGN published their own position paper, and as well Women in Nuclear Global was also publishing their own position paper. Also, the International Youth Nuclear Congress was publishing a position paper in here. During COP21, we did have a big booth at the gallery, which was a part of the whole conference. There were several parts. So there was the official delegation part, where only delegates and representatives of the countries could enter. We did have a booth there, but also we had a bigger one with all our side events in this gallery zone. At the COP22 in Marrakesh, the young generation took over the organizational part for the zone. We had our own booth there and were represented for 2 weeks. That meant also that we had no side event at this conference, so we tried to gather as much attention as possible with the booth. We were interviewed by the media a lot and tried to be present at all the other side events that were talking about energy and climate change, just to pose a question, is nuclear included? And then moving towards COP23, which was last year in Bonn in Germany, we did have 2 booths. So the organizers saw that the nuclear part is very important. We had altogether 30 representatives of the Nuclear for Climate initiatives. We did get a side event. We had a room for 40 people, and it was so packed that you could hardly breathe in there with 70 participants. Some impressions. And we also did a bit of some fun. So we bought a lot of bananas and put some sticker on it, how much radiation you get from this banana, and try to bring them to the other booths. We got some Twitter feedbacks on this communication campaign. And for the side event, we had 5 speakers representing as the young generation as well as climate campaign people like Kirsty Gogan from Energy for Humanity, so somebody who is not working in nuclear. And we did have a really good discussion. We did have a lot of anti-nuclear people in there, but it was a very well-balanced discussion. The social media campaigns in 2017, I'm just showing this for that you can see what we are doing. So we try to use all the social media channels that we have regarding from IYNC and from all the Nuclear for Climate teams. And we try to tweet, we try to put something on Facebook, we try to animate people to change their profile picture to include the Nuclear for Climate logo. So there were 3 waves altogether, plus during the COP meeting in Bonn. So we get usually quite a lot of impressions, and we usually get very good responses from all over the world. And I think the most important question is probably now, how can you join? So we will need you as all of the representatives all over Europe. You can either join your local YGN and just tell them, your local YGN chair, that you would like to be part of the Nuclear for Climate initiative and help us actively out in Poland, which will be in December, from December 3rd to December the 12th. You can just go on our website and write us an email. You can also, if you don't have time to come to Poland, you can just retweet something that comes from Nuclear for Climate, share posts on Facebook, change your profile picture in the action weeks with the Nuclear for Climate logo. There are a lot of ways that you can help out, or just talk to your neighbors, your friends about nuclear. That would help us a lot. So this is everything from my side, and I will hand back to Andrea for the questions and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eileen, and also to Valerie. That was I found that really interesting personally, and I'm sure the audience did as well. So if anyone does have any questions, could you please type them into the questions box, which you'll see down the right-hand side of your panel, and I will be able to read those out when they come through. So I think we have one through already. And it is from Kang Leong Chan, and she says that she's from Malaysia. May I join the ENS?
Hi there. You can join the local Malaysian YGN. We do have representatives there. If you send an email to the organizers of the webinar, I can give you the contact details.
Okay, we'll just give people just a minute to type any questions in. So we've got one through from Mark Smith, and he's asked, any discussion of nuclear as a force for environmental good must hit against how to deal with waste. Have you looked into discussing this?
Can you repeat the question? Do you hear me?
So he's saying that any discussion of nuclear as a force for environmental good must hit against how to deal with waste. So I think it's just asking if there's, a discussion to be had there about, discussing how we can best deal with the waste to then counteract the sort of environmental argument, perhaps.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question because every time we ask as a nuclear industry to talk publicly, it's always to answer question about safety and waste. So what we're saying is that we need to look at the overall environmental impact on nuclear, which includes, I think, four subjects that are becoming, I think, the main subjects for the world: climate, air pollution, because you know that we don't produce any small particles, we don't produce any SOx or MOx. The first subject being the impact on biodiversity. We have been rated as the best energy for biodiversity because of our small footprint. And the fourth subject being the impact on resources. And we talk a lot about uranium, but there's also a very good performance of nuclear on materials and metals such as steel, as well as concrete and the use of concrete in the future. So we always try to have nuclear being seen for the overall impact on all the different dimensions. Specifically during the climate conference, we're pushing our role on the climate agenda because we believe first, this is a priority for a climate conference, and second, on the climate issue, as I tried to show, we really have a strong misunderstanding around the public because most of the public actually believe we are responsible for climate change. So we want really to convey that based on the studies that I've shown that we are a solution, or we are part of the solutions, as I said.
Thanks, Valerie. So we've had another question come through from Vincent Massut. He's asked, do you plan any action towards mass media, such as TV, papers, national or international?
Yes. So when we did the position paper, we've pushed it on a list of worldwide media. And also, I think Eileen could cover that. When the team is on the ground at the conference, they try to really engage with journalists. This is difficult for us to engage with, journalists on the environment side in general. What we found was actually incredibly effective has been the use of Twitter for us. I think from what Eileen showed, we've managed when we all tweet together to achieve a presence of nearly 300,000 views worldwide. So we found, especially in countries that use a lot of Twitter, like North America, and using the accounts, there are a few very powerful accounts among the associations, like the American Nuclear Association, the Nuclear Energy Institute in the United States, or WNA, or the Foratom account, where we have a lot of followers. We have also a good account in Japan, which is Atoms in Japan. That is actually very efficient for us as well to be seen by decision makers.
Yes,
so we're
I can
trying
add
to look
here.
at the yes.
Yeah, I can add here that especially for the national part of mass media, we are in close contact with the Polish young generation that has excellent contacts in there. And we will go for a broader view this time, especially regarding media. And as Valerie said, usually we try to tag everything via social media. Now we are a bit better known already. In the last years, we have built up our relations towards journalists, so they even start coming to us. So this gets better and easier each and every year. There are a lot of journalists on site during the conferences, so they just come for an interview, and this is then broadcasted usually.
All right. Thanks for that, Eileen and Valerie. So I think we'll finish up the questions there. And if anyone does have any further questions, I'm sure Valerie would be happy to get those directly. Is that all right, Valerie?
Yes,
Okay,
of course.
perfect. All right. Well, thanks everyone for logging on today, and there will be a recording available of this presentation, which will be distributed via email to anyone who has registered. If you wanted to watch it again and share it within your networks to spread the word as widely as possible, because I mean that sounds like what it's all about. So thanks again to our wonderful presenters, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.